You're on, yep.
Yeah, right before that first week.
I'd like to call the meeting of August 15th to order. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Sorry, it's the first time I've done it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any additions to the agenda?
Yes, under old business 4.1, fall coaching.
Okay. Other additions? May I have the motion to approve the agenda as amended? All those in favor? May I have a motion to approve the minutes of July 11th, reorganizational and regular meetings? Any discussion? All those in favor? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as recommended by the superintendent? That includes the transportation report, the extracurricular treasurer's report, the 2019-20 tax levy, the transfer of funds, and fall coaching.
So moved. Second.
What was the addition for the fall coaching discussion? Sorry.
Recommended action for Lauren Reynolds as the modified boys soccer coach.
Oh, so it's on here,
It is on there.
but it
It was not on
was
the
not on the
original.
original. Okay. Any other discussion on those sections? All those in favor of the consent agenda? Opposed? And that brings us to our first general public speaking point. If anybody would like to come to the podium, please do so. Please remember that it's a 3-minute time limit. Microphone's open. Okay. We'll move on to 5.2, which is our teacher presentation. It is with Mrs. Lehman, Ms. Freed, Mrs. Chamberlain, and Ms. Wolf. Please come on.
Okay, so last year with the grant that we are sharing with Camden, the Professional Development Plan Committee was aware that there was money for professional development. So after much discussion, the consensus was that we were going to focus on problem-based learning and designing lessons and implementing problem-based learning at Hamilton. We had done some investigation. Some of us have been to conferences before, and I've always gotten pretty excited about doing problem-based learning, and then it kind of fell by the wayside because we felt our schedule didn't really permit it. So Kevin and Bill, Mr. Ellis and Mr. Dowson investigated some companies that would come and help PBL work here at Hamilton, and that's where we decided to focus our interest. And they found a really good company called Magnify Learning. So about 25 teachers 3 or 4 weeks ago attended 4 days of training here at Hamilton, provided by Magnifying Learning, and it lasted, 4 days, and it was from 8:30 to 3:30 with an hour for lunch in between. And I'm just here, I want to say the grant money was extremely well spent. In my opinion, this was one of the best professional developments that I've been at Hamilton for a really long time. I'm really looking forward to continuing our work with this company. I learned a lot. I think we came away with a lot. The presenter, one of the things I was most impressed with is the presenter did not waste any of our time. He didn't come in and try and convince us that problem-based learning was the way to go and this is what we should do. He came in and said, okay, this is how you do it. and taught us right away, which was great because we were already interested or we wouldn't have been at the workshop, you know. So I really appreciated that. Right on the very first day, we got to work. And that very first day, we all began designing our own individual units. I worked on mine. Some teachers worked together in pairs, but we all got to work right away. And every day thereafter, there were mini workshops where the consultant did some instruction, showed us the process to go through, and then gave us time to work on it. And not just like, oh, we've got 15 minutes before we're supposed to break for lunch, so go ahead and work on your project. It was a good chunk of time, like an hour, a half hour, an hour and a half time slots, where we just got to work and research on our own. And the consultant is in the room, so if a question came up, he was right there to help us through it. So it was just, you know, we had our questions answered immediately. There was a chance for feedback, a chance to get suggestions from them. It was just fabulous. It really gave us the power to persevere with this, not give up, and it built up our confidence that we really can do this here at Hamilton. So we also learned and experienced different methods to encourage collaboration and get some constructive feedback. And for me, one of the most important things too is we finished the 4 days with a product. We all ended with a complete unit or a nearly complete unit that we will implement this school year. And that was just fabulous. So, you know, we have an immediate thing that we can use. It's not something to put on the shelf. The training really energized us. It really sparked our interest. And I think we're all really excited to get started with this in this school year.
One of the things that we did was there was a lot of different protocols. A lot of them started, like we would start one each day and it was like team building. You could use it in a ton of different ways. I mean, like you could use it in forum, you could use it with different age groups. One in particular is like I like and I wonder, and we used it a lot with different feedbacks. I actually am using it in summer school and I'm actually with the little kids this week. So it's even being able to be used with the littler kids. Like I had first grade this week. So using I like and I wonder, something that you liked about the project or something that you wondered, which then kind of also tied into this kind of foursquare that Emily will talk about in a little bit. But the different protocols were, you could use them with or without the project. So you don't necessarily have to do this huge PBL project. You could just use the protocols on a day-to-day basis. You could pick them up, you could use them in any of our classrooms. They're easily differentiated for all the different levels. And I think the other thing that we kind of took away from it is like, I know for myself, I'm kind of now always looking for those different ways where is there something in the community that I could bring into my classroom? Because it was pretty community-based. You know, is there a problem that's going on right now that ties into what I'm teaching so that it makes it sort of that more like right here now, makes it relevant for kids, which sometimes hopefully hooks kids more with that relevant piece like it's happening now. So that was just one piece. The PBL. I'd like to talk about some more.
So to kind of show you how this has come together for me and what I'm going to be doing with my students is I'm going to be co-teaching a PBL lesson with Sarah Zogby, who's in special ed, and we both have 8th grade social studies students. So we're going to be doing a time capsule, which is going to bring in those historical thinking skills right at the start of the school year. So that's leading to like the driving questions, the problem statement, pulling in community members, making sure we're hitting on a bunch of different standards. So there's this kind of 6-step PBL planning template that our teacher gave us that kind of helps you plan all of this out, which has been really nice. And we're really excited because we are talking with a historian from Madison County who has experience with time capsules. We are going to bring him to talk to all of the 8th grade social studies students to help them understand why you study history, why being a historian is important. And they're going to be the ones responsible for creating this time capsule, highlighting their life as an 8th grade HCS student here in our Hamilton community. And then what Monica was referencing right here, this grid, Sarah and I would present our project to other teachers, elementary and other secondary, and they would come up with questions, things they liked about our project, things that they wondered, and additional resources that maybe that we didn't think about. So it kind of made us go back to the project and revamp it even more. So the collaborative aspect of PBL was really exciting and energizing.
So I did the elementary training, and one big takeaway for us was the driving question, which so I just made right here so it's really clear. And I just really liked it because I felt like my whole project, I could always reference this and I could make sure like I'm following the parameters of what like is what I'm doing answering this question. So it's how can we as, and then you would give your students a role that's like more than just my 5th grade students. So an example of mine was how can we as artists and community members. So I just really like that they got this larger role for themselves. And then the verb task is like the how. So mine was how can we as artists create representational art about hunger. And then the next part would be so that, or and I put and use it to benefit the needs of people in our community. So as I was building the rest of the lesson, everything would come back to that, like, am I answering this question and is that their role? And I forgot what I put initially, but I ended up changing their role when I realized what they were doing as I like continued it. The other thing that the elementary teachers really enjoyed from the PBL was the ability to collaboratively plan, not only with their team, but with special teachers like me. So I'm collaborating with 5th grade. A lot of people collaborated with Amy Jerome, the librarian. And then, they were able to vertical plan too. So like kindergarten and 1st grade both have a similar standard that is about community and exploring your community. And they were able to work together in order to make sure that they weren't overlapping the learning too much, but they were instead like building on what they learned in kindergarten and then 1st grade. So that was really meaningful. So it also taught us, as Monica talked about the protocols, like it reminded us how important our relationship is with each other as teachers for the kids, and then as well as, our relationships with the kids. So it was really great. Oh, and the last thing I forgot to mention, sorry. I felt like the driving question also gave it authenticity, and I feel like that was, like I create projects with kids all year long, so for me that idea was, easy, but the idea of having like, why are we doing this, what's our purpose, like that was really powerful in the training, I thought. So yeah.
It was a really good opportunity also to interact between the secondary and the elementary. And the kind of feedback, because the secondary was working in here and we got feedback from each other, but then we took our projects down to the elementary and the perspective was just so different and the suggestions for improvements or changing modifications were just, it was great. And that's something we don't have a lot of time to do, so that was really, really nice to experience.
Yeah, it was really great.
It was a great 4 days
Mm-hmm.
in general, yeah.
It was really fun. And we have all these exciting things happening. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. How do you see that collaboration between the secondary and the elementary going throughout the year and throughout planning next summer and that type of thing? How do you see that?
Oh, I can answer that a little bit. Well, I know we talked about with Mr. Dawson a little bit, like, I think we do need some extra time for collaboration, and this was like a big eye-opening, experience where we felt like we haven't had this, like, there's never enough time, but we just haven't quite had the time to really sit with people that we don't normally sit with and talk about opportunities that we have. So we did mention, right, we talked about, just trying to come up with ways where can we give our teachers this time to work together and really collaborate. So hopefully this year we'll.
I think as we get more comfortable with this, with us all trying it, the more comfortable we get with it, the easier it will become, which then will lend itself to be, where maybe we reach out with a younger group or even a higher group. Maybe we go down or go up if we're like Emily and I who are kind of in the middle. So I think as we get more comfortable with it and our confidence grows, it lends itself to us being more collaborative.
That's great.
I just have a minor question. PBL used to be project-based learning, and now you're calling it problem. Is it just an effort to be more accurate, or is there difference?
In math, we tend to do problem-based as opposed to project-based. In math, project-based learning generally is a large project that will encompass one entire unit or several units. And in math, in order to get the content, and the other great thing for me is that our presenter this summer was a math teacher, so it was phenomenal. But in math, in order to get all the content in, we do shorter projects. So I may have a project that only lasts 2 days instead of a whole marking period. Although I did my project, I refined my AP Stats project. So my project actually is gonna last all year. But that's special for statistics. For something like geometry, I see it being a smaller unit, smaller chunk.
And they were so flexible, like they wanted us to know that like we could do this how it worked best in our classroom. Like there's no completely right or, you know, wrong way to do it. Like you can small scale or large scale or in the middle, which was really cool.
And I think we've always been somewhat quick to discard it because like my geometry class is 9th graders, 10th graders, some 11th and a couple 12th graders occasionally. So if I wanted to do a project that involved a social studies or an English teacher, we're talking 2 different teachers who are doing 2 different subjects. So we always kind of just said, that's not going to work here. And what we found is that I can design it just so it's self-contained in my classroom and still pull in those different aspects and use them. It just doesn't need to be a grand collaboration between a whole nother class.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the teachers that spent the time. Sounds like a great couple days. That brings us to 6.1, we have a resignation. Sarah McElroy, resignation as a math teacher effective August 23rd, as recommended by the secondary principal and superintendent. Any discussion? Do we have to be general or in exec session? All those in favor? We have several appointments. So I need a motion to approve the appointments for Allison Forth, Oshrid Helfont, Sherry Hope, Patricia Long, Kelly Donato. Can I keep going? Coordinators, part-time positions, and the extracurricular advisors. Any discussion?
Sounds like some great hires.
Let them muffle.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
That was it?
You want to dance?
No, I'm not gonna dance for you right now.
We're excited.
Welcome.
Start Monday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She already started, actually.
I need a motion to approve the recommendation of the committees on special education and preschool special education.
Second.
Any discussion would be an exec session, so all those in favor? I need a motion to approve the 18-19 APPR implementation certification for the 19-20 school year and submit it to SED as recommended by the superintendent.
So,
Any discussion?
yeah, to be honest, I don't really know what that means. The 18-19 implementation?
So we are required to submit our APPR plan annually to SED for approval. So we are rolling over last year's APPR plan.
Okay.
So the 18-19 plan will roll into 19-20.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to adopt the emergency response plan for 19-20 school year as recommended by the business manager and superintendent.
So moved.
Any discussion?
You need more work.
Yeah, if I tell you what we changed on this, I'm sure you noticed, we had to, this district level plan has been in existence for a long time. there was a recent regulation that required school districts to appoint a chief emergency officer. So there was one sentence added in this that names the superintendent our chief emergency officer. So that is why this appeared again this year.
Well, thank you for making the update.
Sure.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have some policies for first reading, for discussion only. It's policy 4511, procurement uniform grant guidance for federal awards.
Also moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I read it, and, I mean, it's highly technical. If BOCES and our lawyers say that this is the way to go, then I think this is the way to go. There's nothing in it that I could identify as discretionary. It's state and national regs that we have to adhere to.
New policy.
Yeah, is there anything in here that really goes against what
No.
current practices are?
That means it moves us to information and correspondence. We'll start with administrators' updates.
Okay, so as you heard, the PBL project was, the training went great, and the teachers did a lot of great work and came away with some really neat things that I look forward to seeing in action this school year. I'm also very excited about the hires that we have, the secondary level. They're bringing a lot of experience and come to us very highly recommended from the previous positions. I've looked at a cell phone policy, so a new cell phone policy. Some discussions at the end of last year led us to the fact that certain teachers were collecting cell phones at the beginning of class, and it seemed to be working really well. So now we are extending that, and everyone's going to be collecting cell phones at the beginning of class now. And so I wrote a letter that was sent out today to inform parents of this change and describe that process and any consequences associated with that. Summer school is wrapped up, and we're just waiting for final grades so that we can finalize the schedules of those students and make sure that they're on track. Drone camp, which was held here, has been very successful. The teachers and the students have learned that flying a drone isn't just picking up a remote and flying a drone. There's a lot to it, and there was computer programming, they were looking at a lot of problem-solving skills. So it's been really great, and our challenge now is going to be to how to keep it moving forward. And we talked, you guys looked at the advisors, mentors, coordinators list. And last, we're gearing up for school to start. It's right around the corner. So getting ready for conference days and the students to enter the doors.
I just want to piggyback on two things that Mark mentioned. With regard to PBL, as a show of community support and enthusiasm, Hamilton Emerald Foundation has already voted to approve a grant that Tori wrote for the Empty Bowl project, and they also already voted to approve a grant request from Ostrich for what sounds like a pretty fascinating DNA study, so equipment to get her up to a flying start with some new stuff.
Thank you for that.
Well, I'm not on the AGF, I don't get to vote, so you don't have to thank me. I'm just a spreader of good news.
Oh, and to also add to the PBL training is that's going to continue. We will have opportunities to Skype with some of the professionals. So as teachers are building more lessons, they'll be able to get help from Magnify Learning.
So we'll hopefully build it into some of the conference day, or not conference days, but the days that the teachers are here
Yes.
throughout the year.
Yep.
Keep that going.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Superintendent's days, professional development days.
Those days,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Good.
Good? Yep. Thanks, Mark. So I will too echo how excited we are for our new staff members. They are going to bring expertise. They're going to bring lots of experience and engagement to our students. So welcome, Astrid. We're so happy to have you, and all of our other new hires that couldn't be here tonight, we're super excited about. Just to piggyback off the PBL experience, what excites me is that the excitement in our teachers, you know, the renewed excitement to deliver new instruction is terrific. We are now going to look at some processes to be able to provide some cross-curricular time. So Mark and Kevin and I are going to sit down and look at the schedules and see what we can do to provide those opportunities for teachers to keep that excitement going. So it's going to be fun to see their units and to observe them and look at the engagement that offers. I think this is just a launching point for us as far as PBL goes. We're going to do a deep dive because I think it's the way to go. So just to see the excitement in our teachers who are veterans and new teachers. I had a teacher come up to me who was a veteran teacher and say, you know, I'm super excited, can I rearrange my room? And for that excitement, it was a light bulb went off and said, we're doing good things right now, so that's exciting. So I'm really excited about the direction of that. Hiring update, I just wanted to bring you up to date. You heard the appointments, a resignation in our math department. Right now, we're looking at the possibility of a long-term sub in that position because we are very close to the start of school. And there's many districts right now that are trying to solicit a math teacher. So we're going to reach out to some people to see if they're interested in a long-term sub position to get us started for the school year. So, and we are interviewing aides and TA positions at this point. If you look at your second handout in the packet that I gave you, Ed Law 2D is for student privacy. There's been some updates and quite honestly some attacks for student privacy within our RIC. So at our CSO meeting last Friday, Heather Mahoney, who heads up the RIC, which is our Regional Information Center, handed out these updates about the action steps that they are taking. Fortunately, we were not part of that attack. We were protected through the good work of Chris Rogers and the firewalls that we have in place. We were protected, so we were not one of those districts affected. However, the data security threat landscape is real and school districts are vulnerable. And there's a lot of phishing going on right now in emails. So as part of our staff development, we're going to talk about being careful with our emails, what information we're sharing in emails, using emails for private use. We're going to steer our faculty away from because the phishing, some of these attacks are phishing faculty emails and looking for bank statements, you know, bank numbers or online shopping and pulling that information and it's exposing districts, so we have to be very careful with that. So in that packet is all of our Ed Law 2D updates. Chris Rogers is going to a meeting on Tuesday. It's for all of our data privacy protections and what he will put in place to continue to protect our district.
Bill, how many sheets should be in that packet?
There are one sheet, but it's double-sided.
Okay.
These are just mine that were single-sided, so for your purpose, I double-sided. Continuing with updates and advocacy, at the Board of Regents level, there's preliminary discussions about the Regents diplomas, and there's a misconception right now, just because it's being discussed and examined at the Regents level and at the SED level, that the New York State Regents are going away. That is not true. They are being examined. The commissioner, before she leaves, is putting together a blue ribbon panel to examine the effectiveness of Regents exams and if they should continue in New York State as a graduation requirement. So there's going to be no action by the Board of Regents at this time until they gather more information, but that is out there. So there's a lot of discussion around, as you know, SED in the past years looked at pathways. They're doing the right thing and really looking at student needs and trying to create different pathways for students to graduate. So I think this is a good thing to examine our Regents exams and look to see if that really is a valid requirement for graduation at this point, you know, as we move forward in the future. So more to come on that. Substantial equivalency. We talked briefly about this last year. New York State put out requirements that if you have a private school within your district, you have to do a substantial equivalency audit of their practices to see if they're meeting the expectations of the home district. We have New Life Christian within our district. The private and charter schools appealed those decisions in New York State, and it was upheld. So the substantial equivalency audits are now on hold. So we will not be auditing New Life at this time. So we will still provide services to them, but we will not be doing a substantial equivalency until SED requires it.
And would actually HCS or would our BOCES conduct that audit?
HCS would conduct that audit. So our administrative team would go to New Life, we would look at their lesson plans, we would look at the services that they're providing for students, and we would audit their curriculum and instruction. If you go to labor relations update, time off to vote. So Ed Law 3-110 was amended early this year to provide employees with an expanded right to paid time in order to vote. So we are now required, if you're a registered voter, the employee is entitled to take time off from work up to 3 hours without loss of pay. So this has created a lot of discussion within districts and with labor units. So there's a lot of discussion. We are required to, if you flip back in your pamphlet, post as a registered voter. This has to go up 10 days prior to elections. So there's some procedures that we have to follow to allow that to happen. So I wanted to make you aware of that. And then the last thing in your packet, I'm not sure if you receive on board. You all received that? Okay, so I think as we move and learn and grow together as far as communication and our roles and responsibilities is a great article to help us navigate communication within the community. So
I wouldn't be opposed for you to do this if there's specific things you want us to see.
okay.
Or send us an email and ask us to read
Sure.
specific pieces. I mean, I look at it.
Yeah.
But am I looking at it with the same type of eye as you want us to, or something to that effect of, please hone in on this so that we can
Sure.
talk about it?
Yeah, I'll continue to pull and share.
Yeah,
that.
if there's something in there that you really want us
Yeah.
concentrated on, then I like this idea.
Yeah, I thought it was a great article, and I think it helps us, when
But
we're.
now I'll read it again, because, you know, when you read it.
Yeah. So just so the audience is aware, this is explaining the role of the board to concerned or angry constituents. So, when we're out in the community and board members get asked certain questions, how to respond and react. So it just helps define our roles
Yeah.
and help us in communication, the proper channels.
They never tell us how to respond to happy people.
No, they don't.
Hasn't come up.
We haven't been hit with that one yet. So that is my report. Any questions? Thank you.
Matt, you have anything?
Yeah, a couple things, then I'll segue. I think the capital project is next. Just a couple of brief things. Going back to the tax levy, we're happy to have things finalized this early in August and be able to finalize our tax levy prior to September 1. Couple of trends, though, I just want to point out that are still somewhat concerning. Again, based on the market, the housing market in our community. The equalization rates of all 5 municipalities dropped from last year to this year. So with that, Brookfield and Lebanon Eaton and Lebanon decreasing the most, they will bear the majority of the tax levy increase. So we talk about this every year. And while our levy increased only slightly below 3%, there may be people that have tax bill increases in excess of that due to these factors. Debbie and I were just looking at it before we came in. The actual assessed value of properties, taxable properties in the district, it only went up 1.3 million from last year to this year, which is less than 0.5%. However, the true property value, based on those equalization rates dropping, went up 3.5%, or 14, almost $15 million. So again, property values continue to increase, which you tie in housing, you tie in wealth on a per pupil basis, it continues to be problematic for us. So more of the same in terms of that trend. Last week, it was pretty well publicized around the state, particularly out of the governor's office, about some new legislation about stop arm cameras on school buses. Little bit misleading. A lot of the press releases were sort of presented in a way that suggested that it's now allowable, and that the governor is now authorizing the use of it. We've been using them for a while. We currently have them on all but 3 of our buses. We're in the process of equipping the remaining 3 buses that don't have them with stop arm cameras. We started doing it years ago as we had certain buses that we felt had vulnerable stops in different roads where we saw it happening more than usual. Really, the only change now is how law enforcement can use that to prosecute and go after the offenders. So that's good news. We'll continue to do that. And then just as a segue for the capital project, if you don't have any questions for me or anything. We had a really good meeting last week with King and King. Really to get Bill up to speed on what we've done to this point as he's transitioning, but also to get an update from the architects on the timeline of what's going on. The first piece that we learned, which is great news, I don't know if you remember, going back to last December, around the time of the vote, and even last fall, there was concern about the time, the review time at SED to get these projects pushed through in order to expedite construction. And we thought at the time that we were going to have to go through an expedited third-party review, which you have to pay a considerable amount of money for, like estimated about $25,000, which comes out of the project, but we ended up not having to do that. So we were assigned a project number through SED. We're in the queue to be reviewed soon. So we're on the same timeline, but didn't have to go through the third-party review, which ultimately means that's $25,000 more in project costs that can be put towards actually doing things, not paying somebody because SED is behind. So, it's kind of funny, the architects think that so many people were looking at that, at the queue, they went the third-party route. They sort of waited long enough that the queue really went down because so many people went the third-party route that we were able to just kind of slide right in. So that's good news. Yeah.
Thank you to the others.
In terms of the actual project, it's coming quickly. We're still right on schedule. We'll be doing bidding probably right after the first of the year, which is the most opportune time to bid out these projects.
And you mean the first of the calendar year?
Yes, first of the calendar, yep, January, yep, in the winter, most of these contractors are looking for work. And we started to talk about the scope of work, and what gets done when is really gonna depend on the bidding in terms of how, it's likely going to be HVAC work, and then however much of the roof we can sort of buy based on the bidding condition. If we can schedule things so that we can get work started before school ends, if there's things that can be done before school ends, that's very advantageous to us. If the work can only be done in schools not in session, that really puts a pinch on contractors and really can drive the price up. And that's essentially what all schools are looking for. So
Did we, I don't remember, I'm sorry, did we plan that the HVAC was going to be step 1 and the roof was step 2
the
of that?
HVAC is step 1, and then a portion of the roof is step 1, and then the remaining roof is step 2.
Yeah, I just meant in that step 1, HVAC was supposed to come first originally. Okay.
Really, that's not something that could be done in phases. That had to be done. So, that's exciting. It's coming quickly. So, Our next step, in the next month or two in the fall, we'll be doing, Bill and I and the architects will be interviewing and seeking out a construction management firm. A clerk of the works that's gonna be on site to help guide us through the process. So that's our next big task, and we'll be bidding after the 1st of January. So exciting stuff, and I know Bill had a couple things he wanted to add to.
Yeah, through our conversation with King and King, they are also going to try to secure the construction company who does the roof to commit to both phases. And that might help save costs. They don't know if that can happen, but that's the conversation they're gonna have. So they would do both phases, but understand that that would help reduce some of the costs. Did I explain that correctly? And then our next step as a board, after our September board meeting, is to do a tour with King and King, to look at the scope of the work they're going to do, and to talk about what's next beyond, because there are some steps beyond as far as capital projects, and we talked in our retreat about some possible capital outlays that we'll talk at a future time, but to start looking at the scope of the work that is going to be in phase 1, 2, and 3, and then beyond, because we have to start those discussions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that moves us to 7.4. Board self-evaluation. We discussed this a couple times last year. We wanted to wait until the beginning of this year so that we were all board and have Jen here with us and everything. So we need to discuss a plan. What's our plan so that we have one, and so that we can move through it properly through the year.
You wanna get the ball rolling?
At one point, we did talk about, prior to or after each board meeting each month, we would spend some time working on this. So as it wouldn't be an extra meeting, it would just be an earlier meeting time for us to do that piece. I'm not sure if that's something that we still want to do, or if we want to pick 4 dates during the year and get it done in those 4 dates workshops. I think those would be my 2.
Well, am I correct that it's really not realistic for Ellen to get here any earlier than we already are starting?
I think at one point she said Friday, actually.
Wednesday.
She's free all day Wednesday she. So,
I would prefer to tack it on to the beginning, not the end of a meeting. But if that's unrealistic for Ellen, then we have to maybe do it on a monthly or quarterly basis. I'm retired, so it's easier for me than you folks who have to work for a living.
I can make it work either before or after.
so we'll check with Alan, and we'll start with the idea of, if we can do the monthly meetings, we'll start in September. We'll make an adjustment before the agenda goes out, so that could be public notice that we're meeting together for that reason. And if not, then we can pick a date in September for hopefully October, early November, to make sure that we get some time together. Maybe the first one we'll have to block a couple hours as opposed to just an hour, so that we can really start. I think, in my mind, I would like to have it completed by June, by our June meeting, so that we can say that we've done this year, that we have a good starting place for the following year, and continue this every year from there. If somebody would like it done earlier, I'm not opposed to that, but just throwing that out there as a.
Well, I think that we have this NISBA self-evaluation up in the time when they have, there's something to do.
On that, just because you mentioned it, but we did meet 2 weeks ago? Last week. Last week. We spent several hours together. We came up with both district goals and superintendent goals. And I think the time that we spent together was well worth the time that we spent, and will benefit the district for the year to come. And so thank you all very much for putting aside a whole day for doing that. I think it was really valuable, and I think we left with what I had hoped we'd leave with, which was both sets of goals, and gives us a good place to step forward from there. Thank you. And bring us to community participation. If you'd like to come up, please do so. I'm not going through it now. All right. We do have, I need a motion in a second, but we do have exec session. There will be a vote after that. So you are welcome to stay in the main hall area, and we can come down and check to see if anybody's down there before we have a vote. And you are also welcome to just like, so don't feel like you need to stay, but if you want to, we will check the hallway. I need a motion to move to executive session to discuss current and pending litigation and matters of particular interest. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Take care. No one want to wait?
There's nobody in the hall.
Okay.
They even yelled down the hallway and echo. So I need a motion to approve, I didn't write one down.
No, I have to
Do you
read.
have it written
Yeah,
down?
you should reconvene open session first.
No, we are already in.
You should read this resolution.
Thank you. I knew there was one somewhere, but this will be better than me making it up. I need a motion that the Board of Education will appeal the New York State Review Officer, the decision that was rendered on August 3rd, 2019 by impartial hearing officer Martin J. Cahill III, as recommended by the superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.
I never talked to Debbie about the website, just going on here and see it.